as we heard yesterday on ABC South East, 11-year-old Sunshine Bay Public School student Kaylee Peard calling for action on climate change. She was on her way to the Eurobodalla Council meeting to talk in favour of a motion to declare a climate emergency. This week, Wollongong became the 32nd Australian council to declare climate emergency. They're a part of around 800 across the globe to have declared climate emergencies. But Eurobodalla councillors did not accept the motion from Councillor Pat McGinlay, voting for an alternative form of words instead. And here to tell us more is Eurobodalla Mayor Councillor Liz Innes. Councillor Innes, hello.
Good morning, Simon. How are you?
Very well, thanks for joining us on ABC South East. Why no climate emergency declaration for Eurobodalla?
Well, Simon, I think one of your callers just enunciated it pretty well, and that was that I think the councillors were of a view that it was very much an unknown, that there weren't costings associated with it, and, you know, it is a very complex area. So Council opted, Simon, to do what we have always been doing. And it is interesting, the other comment is mentioned, you know, should local government or local councils weigh into climate change, the climate change issue. We already are, Simon. I mean, yesterday, you know, we put up a motion that recognises the work that council is doing in this space. And to get us to that space, I mean, our 2030 target is an emissions reduction of 80%. Now, I note that Sydney Council's target for the same time is 70%. So Eurobodalla Shire is, you know, we are ambitious in this space. There is no doubt that we are taking action. But when we do make these decisions, Simon, it goes through a process, and an appropriate process, where we are able to ask questions about the triple bottom line, and that is the financial cost, the social cost, and also the environmental cost. And that's very important, Simon, because at the end of the day, we have to be responsible with all of the decisions that we make and the impacts that they have on our ratepayers.
All right. Is there a risk here that the climate emergency movement might lead to something more, and that while governments refusing to make declarations like that could be left looking weak on climate action despite what you are doing in effect?
Look, I'm going to leave that entirely to those to those different groups. You know, that's entirely their business, what actions they want to take. But what I will say to you again, Simon, and what clearly was, you know, articulated by my fellow councillors yesterday, was that we will be responsible. We will do the right thing. We will take all of those views into consideration. And Simon, there are very passionate views on both sides of this debate. And it's important for councillors to really take into consideration all of those views, not just the ones with very loud voices that come in a very passionate manner. So, you know, Simon, look, Eurobodalla Shire Council is leading the way in this space in a lot of areas, but we are doing it in a responsible manner that is well considered. Now, some of the things that the initiatives that we have done, you know, by changing our street lighting over, for example, into LEDs, that has made a significant saving to Eurobodalla. I think it's over $1 million. Now, these are responsible things that we can do and that we are doing, and we will continue to do that.
And so council voted instead for an alternative motion which uses the term variable changing climate rather than climate emergency. Do you personally disagree that there is a climate emergency?
Simon, look, I'm not going to make comment on whether I think there's a climate emergency. I recognise that we are in a time when we need to be, and I would say that this is reflected in most people's views, is that we are in a time when we need to be really seriously looking at how we use our resources, whether they be energy resources, whether they be our water resources, our food resources. And, you know, whether we're in a climate emergency, and you can call it whatever you like, it is beholden on all of us, Simon, to be responsible with those resources. And, that's the perspective from where I have always come from. Since I've been brought up as a child, I have always had it instilled in me. Be responsible, be conservative with your use of resources. And, I think that's by and large been reflected in Council's motion yesterday.
Okay, now let's move on to other things before the Council yesterday. And Racing New South Wales wants to buy Moruya Racecourse.
Sorry, Simon, there is just one final comment I would like to make on the climate change.
Sure.
And you mentioned that, there were so many councils, signing up and declaring climate emergency. It needs to be noted that Wagga yesterday rescinded their emergency declaration. Now, they did so because of exactly what one of your callers articulated, and that is the uncosting. They came under an enormous amount of pressure from their community to say, you need to be responsible before you make these statements. So, you just need to know that there are consequences to making such declarations, and I think it is important that councils going forward are very conscious of, just what the ramifications of making a declaration might be.
All right. Now, how much do you want for Moruya Racecourse?
Well, of course, I think everybody wants the best price that we can possibly get, but putting the price aside, because I cannot disclose that and I can't talk about that, that's commercial in confidence, but nonetheless, Council, we're absolutely, aiming to get the best price we possibly can. But I think it's really important to understand, Simon, that Racing New South Wales has clearly come out and said that they really have a desire to invest some serious dollars into the Moruya Racecourse, but to do so, they have indicated that they want to be the owners of the site. Now, the Moruya Jockey Club's board is absolutely supportive of this, and they have a 50-year lease over the site. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens, Simon. It's gone out for 28 days for community feedback, and, it'll be interesting to see what our community... But, I personally think that this is probably a very good solution. It will see Moruya Racecourse, have some serious investment and become a centre of regional racing excellence. And, Simon, we did some work a few years ago on the value to our local economy of the equine industry, and in particular the racing industry. And, Simon, they make a huge contribution to our local economy. So, I think that this would be a very good outcome, not only for, racing and racing fans, but also for the broader equine industry in Eurobodalla.
I really have no idea how much a racecourse goes for these days. Would it be in the tens of millions?
Look, no, Simon, and I think what people need to understand is that the site is very constrained. It cannot be used for anything else. It is not zoned for a big hotel complex. It's not zoned for anything other than being used as a racecourse. So it's very limited in its potential uses.
And you've got some neighbouring freehold dwellings as well.
That's exactly right. Now, those freehold dwellings, they were initially put in there for training establishments. So, it is entirely understandable that the future of that whole area really, it is, I think it is beholden on, Racing New South Wales, and I think they've done the right thing by coming forward, because it will mean that they can seriously invest in that whole area.
Okay, and now about 4 weeks of public consultation on that, so people have the chance to comment before Council takes any further moves. Now, rural lands and environmental zoning before the meeting as well, and I'm just looking at the difference here between what's before the state government, that's the local environment plan, and what Council was voting on yesterday.
Right.
The development control plan.
Okay. So, Simon, part of the process that we went through, now remember this has been going on for 9 years, and I note some of the comments that a previous speaker this morning made about, recent, attempts to try and stop the LEP. But, Simon, I'm just going to go back to some of the community consult that has gone on over this process. We've had thousands of submissions on this. We've had, communication from hundreds of rural landowners supporting the direction that council ultimately has gone in. And one of those things that was really clear is that they wanted the biodiversity overlay to be embedded in the DCP. Now, reasons for that was so that if it does need to be amended, it can be amended at a local level and not have to go through a gateway determination process, which can take up to 2 years. Now, there's talk that we're unwinding environmental protections, et cetera, et cetera. This is just not true, Simon. The same considerations will be undertaken if it sits in a DCP or an LEP. Our staff cannot get around that. Now, comments of, councillors being put under pressure, all of these decisions are determined under delegation by our council staff. Now, they cannot step outside of the guidelines. If they do, they face us and council ending up in court. So, to say that we're unwinding environmental legislation, that's just simply not true. And to say that we haven't broadly consulted, that's also simply not true. We have consulted every single person that wanted to have their say through this process has been afforded that opportunity. In fact, we had specific workshops just geared for conservation views. So, at the end of the day, if people have said they haven't had a chance to have their say, well, look, I'm sorry, but they absolutely have.
Okay. And what about the point made by Catherine Maxwell from the Nature Coast Alliance this morning? And I'll just explain the local environment plan yet to be finalised by the State Department of Planning. And Catherine is saying that to now make decisions about the development control plan, which comes under that, is, in her words, putting the cart before the horse.
Well, again, that's just simply not true, Simon. Through this process, as I said before, one of the clear things was that our community indicated that they wanted the biodiversity overlay to be embedded into the DCP. Now, that is exactly what we are doing through this process. And why we have done it is because we have had no indication from the department. In fact, we've had the opposite information from the department to say, we have gone through all the concerns that supposedly these 6 departments were opposing the whole lot of the LEP. That's not true either. We've worked through some of the concerns that they raised, and we have had indication that, yes, that whilst there were some concerns about the overlay being put into the DCP, at the end of the day, we've worked through that process. That's what's going to happen. It needs to happen so that when the timeline for the LEP being announced and signed off on, that we have done our, we've done our homework and that everything is ready to roll out, and we will not then have a period of time where we don't have the biodiversity overlays sitting anywhere.
Okay, thank you very much. And turning to some action in Bateman's Bay today with that bridge replacement project. We're going to see the bridge open to let some of that happen.
Well, she's just gone through, apparently. I've been sent some photos from Bateman's Bay this morning, and it looks absolutely spectacular, Simon. So, I'm sure that you'll start to see on social media some images of that. So, it's pretty exciting times in Bateman's Bay right at the moment, Simon. Yeah,
another really big barge and joining another barge that came through earlier. How long will we see them around the bay?
Well, look, they'll be there. My understanding is pretty much till the completion of the bridge, but, don't quote me on that one, Simon. But this one, just a few fun facts for your listeners, is that this one's 20 metres wide, 55 metres long. It's, like I said, it came in today, and, it left Brisbane River on Tuesday the 6th of August, which is, that's a massive journey. and it was moored in Jervis Bay for a night because of, the winds and things that we had. And the other thing that probably will be of interest to your listeners, Simon, is that, these barges are thoroughly cleaned of biohazardous materials before they are allowed into our beautiful Clyde River.
Fantastic. Lots happening on the river today. Councillor Liz Innes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon.
Councillor Innes there, the Mayor of the Eurobodalla Shire Council.